Introduce a panel. We're going to have a panel discussion, and it's Ricky Leahy, Alan McCaw, and Dennis Crowley, and Linda. So if you guys would all like to come to the stage, that'd be fantastic. Thank you. The people down the far end, if you'd like to come down over here, there are seats over here. That's just the fire exit, so we need to make sure that that's kept clear. So please move down, and there are seats over here. And if everybody else could squish across, that would be most appreciated. Thank you.
Oh, here, Matt. So this is really following on a bit from my last talk. It's about sustainable beekeeping. How do we get into a situation, or are we still in a situation of sustainable beekeeping? We're at about 700,000 hives in the country now. I pose the question, can we get to 1 million hives? Can we get to 1.5 million hives and still have sustainable beekeeping? Overstocking and ethics. I want this session to be an iterative session. It's not about naming and blaming or telling a sob story. I want to look for solutions, and I provided some solutions in my last talk. So when I ask for questions, I'd like really your input on solutions about how you see we could, as a country, as an industry, get through this. So what I'll do now is I'll just introduce our panel. Running away now. First on my left here is Dr. Linda Newstrom-Lloyd. She's a specialist in pollination ecology and flower biology. She is the principal scientist behind Trees for Bees, and she's been conducting research on bee health and nutrition since 2009. I'll ask them to give a 2-minute presentation on their ideas around sustainable beekeeping and ethics, but I'll just introduce the rest of the panel first. Next to her is Dennis Crowley. He's a commercial beekeeper, and he's been involved in pollination sector for many years. Past president of the National Beekeepers Association, and like me, he has been elected onto the board of Apiculture New Zealand as a commercial representative. Beyond him is Ricky Leahy, immediate past president of the National Beekeepers Association and a member of the APNZ interim executive, and he's been nominated onto the board of APNZ. He's a successful beekeeper, running, I think, about 2,000 hives, I think, Ricky? Nod. And beyond him is Alan McCaw on the far end there. Alan, of course, is based in Otago. He is a past president of the National Beekeepers Association, life members of the National Beekeepers Association, and also, of course, APNZ. And he has a 50-year involvement in the industry, and he chairs the Honey Packers and Export Council. So we have a pretty auspicious panel. And starting from Linda here, would you like to speak? Alan, do you want to speak first? Okay, go for it.
Is this on? Yes, it is. Okay, thank you, Barry. 40 years, I'm not quite that old yet. 50 years is looming up rapidly, though it's quite a scary thought, but when I first came to beekeeping, I came to my father-in-law's business down in Otago, and I have to say that at the present time still, things are somewhat different down our way to what we're hearing up here, but however, it's creeping in, folks. We've got buyouts going on, we've got changes occurring, our industry has changed, the number of people at this conference. I've sat up in front of the National Beekeeper Association conferences and talked to 150 people and thought it was fantastic. This is just incredible. So having said that, what I'm going to do is, for a start off, is just talk briefly about basically what I mean by overstocking, and I'll just raise some questions, and hopefully some of our friends here on the right will be able to answer some of those questions for us. Please excuse if my voice gives out. I've picked up a cold somewhere in the last couple of days. Can't hear? Am I not? Is that better? Okay, sorry. Okay. The question of overstocking, or too many bees for a particular area, however you want to define it, is certainly one that's got a lot of interest going for it at the present time. And with the rapid upsurge in bee numbers, it's hardly surprising. And it depends on who you're talking to as to how you make that definition. But I've had some thoughts. There's three main sort of types of overstocking or measures of it, in my opinion. The first one are climatic and seasonal factors, the weather and what you can do within the confines of what the weather gives you in each area, and it's quite different from Northland to what it is down here where we are in Targa Southland. The second one is, or B, is food supplies and resource factors, and the third one is actually beekeeper action factors, I've called it, for want of a better term. In other words, the things that we do. Okay, are there remedies, or how do we respond to those factors? Well, we can't do a heck of a lot about the first one, the weather or the climatic factors. We can maybe change the elevation of our bees by shifting them off the high country and down to the low country. Barry alluded to that in his talk. However, when you live in my part of the world, or the country, the low country goes all the way down to sea level, or the high country goes all the way down to sea level. And you get those kinds of dramatic weathers that, and even in the middle of summer, I've seen us have a snowfall on Christmas Eve. But, however, it doesn't happen very often. You can, hive locations, Barry said, you can do something about that. Okay, second possibility of overstocking being the food supplies and resources. Well, you can do limited things about that. This morning we heard a lot about nutrition. You can feed your bees. You can add additives to it. But the bees are a natural animal. They need a total picture. So you can do so much for that, but it's a slow process. I'm sure Linda will tell us about that. It takes time and dedication, and it takes money. The third one is the most controversial one of all, which is the beekeeper factor, the things that we do to ourselves and to each other. And this is the one where the real issues tend to be arising, and I've heard some incredible stories in recent times of the sorts of things that are happening to people and this whole concept of landowner versus with beekeeper deals is something that I just can't get my head around because we're just not used to that. We have the opposite effect. We have landowners looking for bees to come on. It's probably the most difficult to manage. A certain amount of self-control is warranted. And you could go to a regulatory remedy, but who by and who's going to do it to who and what's it going to consist of. A voluntary remedy or an agreement, if you like, amongst beekeepers basically I think has a great deal more to offer if you're going to have one. A gentleman's agreement, the handshake over the bar, used to work. And I heard someone say once that a deal made over a jug of beer lasts about as long as the jug of beer does. And however, I say where there's a will, there's a way. Question is there a will for us as an industry to do something about this, to try and help each other to come to a decision on this? And if there is, can we find a way?
I've heard from lots of you beekeepers that there's a fair bit of angst out there with people pushing in on your sites, and you're worried about overpopulation of the sites, and I just feel that somehow we do need to return to the old-fashioned beekeeper ethics of the past. We need to somehow find cooperation between beekeepers, because really there are effects of overstocking. And I believe our landowners, our farmers need to also realise that you can't just pile beehives on a certain environment. There are limits, like as we probably heard this morning, like very strong hives, they actually need a lot of pollen, they need a lot of nectar. So if you've got too many hives in one place, all the nectar, all the resources are just going to feed all those strong hives, and we aren't going to get any excess honey from them. So we really have to work together. We have to understand these things. Farmers need to understand these things. They just can't just come to partnership arrangements with beekeepers just and thinking big dollar signs up there. Sometimes it doesn't work like that. So do we need to understand all these aspects? Do we need to understand and get some sort of resource management type policies in place This is what we've got to work out. This is what we've got to try and work on in the future so that we can all carry on beekeeping happily, I believe. Yeah.
In all these discussions, there's always that bastard that wants to be the devil's advocate, so that's going to be me. The only rule in New Zealand about what you can do with a hive site pertains to yourself, and that is under the AFP Pest Management Strategy, and that is you have a hive here, you must register that site. Take note, those who don't register their hives. If I have another hive 200 metres away, it becomes another registered site. So within my first site, and before I reach 200 metres, I can have 125,000 hives on that one registered site before the next hive becomes a second site. There's 8.6 million, New Zealand's able to have 8.6 million hive sites. And if we stack them at 125,000 hives a site, that's just over 1 billion hives in New Zealand. We're not quite there yet, but when I listen to people, some people think we are close. So it got me thinking, what's the production been like in New Zealand over the last... Well, I went back 1985, and I got these figures off Airborne Honey's website. From 1985 through to 2011, the average honey production of New Zealand hives is 30 kilos a hive. From about 2000, and the hives numbers range from 250,000 to about 300,000 hives, and they fluctuated over that last sort of 30 years. The last 7 years, when we've started to see the real influx of hive numbers, and we're up to now, as Barry says, 700 hives. So the average production per hive over the last 6 years, bearing in mind that hive numbers have been going up like that, is once again 30 kgs a hive. So it makes me wonder, in some areas, do we really have a stocking rate, or do we just don't like the bastard that's put 100 hives over there because I've only got 20 here? And we haven't done any science on what stocking rates our hives sites can take. We think we have, and Linda, I'm sure, have started doing some, and we desperately need that. For me as a commercial beekeeper, when it comes to a site, I'm looking at sites and I choose not to stock them ridiculously for other hive husbandry reasons, which you've heard some things about discussed at this, the discussions on hive health and that sort of things. So, yeah, we can't fit a lot of hives in some areas. There's always different microclimates that need adjusting, but are we just jumping up and down because we hate the big so-called corporates coming in, or do we just have to harden up and think, hang on a minute, we are in a business that is changing dramatically, and maybe we need to start changing our game plan a little bit. And it's
Could you wrap it up?
It's going to hurt some people. Some people will carry on, but we do need scientifics to look at this.
Could we?
I had some more to say, but
Could we please have a bell at 2 minutes, please, just as we go on? It's just... Linda.
Hi. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
This is a big problem. It's a pretty big change. 300,000 hives to 680,000 hives is a lot. If you look at a map of where those hives are, they are concentrated in areas like Canterbury, Hawke's Bay. There's concentrations in the Northland, etc. And there's lots of consequences to overstocking. And is New Zealand overstocked? I don't have data, and I can't tell you yes or no, but I can tell you that I am losing sleep over it at night, because when I think of the numbers of hives that people are talking about, they're talking, the stories I hear for at a regional level, Hawke's Bay, 10,000 hives coming in on top of what's already there. Canterbury or Kaikoura now, I mean, these are rumors. I don't have data. But we're talking thousands of hives. You multiply 1,000 hives by 60,000 bees, and then you multiply that they each need 5 milligrams of pollen to grow from an egg to an adult, each bee. Then, now, the only little bit of data I've got, I'm trying to work on this, and the only little bit of data I've got right now is we have measured flax. So here's the question. How many flax flowers does it take to grow one bee from egg to adult? Well, on average, over several 8 cultivars, we got 5 milligrams of pollen per flower, a flax flower. Now, flax is the best pollen you could ever plant for bees because it's 35, 45, up to 50% protein. It's the highest we've got of protein in the pollen. And that means you need 25 flowers to grow 1 bee from egg to adult. So if you multiply all this up, that's one way of doing it. Now, we're going to wait a long time for the science, but right now you can just listen to the beekeepers because they know when their bees go backwards. And so beekeeper experience right now is the only way that we can talk about carrying capacity. If we'll ever get really well, if we ever get far enough to match the beekeeper's experience, that's going to take some time. But the beekeeper experience is trial and error. And the complaints that we're getting from beekeepers who have had to move their hives because their hives fail because someone else moved 100 hives next door, 200 meters away, I think that we need a database of
Could we finish there, Linda? Yep. Thank you. I'll just run through a series of slides just to reinforce the topic. The first one here is just showing a bee nuisance. It's not a swarm, it's a bunch of bees on a sign. I actually took it some years ago after a harvest period in a certain area. This is becoming more of a problem too. Bees on a truck fuel stop, roadside apiary, not sure where that is. Yeah, taken. So what is acceptable? Is it okay? Do we consider the implications of our actions? What about the school bus and the kids, neighbours? Is a large dump site 200 metres from a residential area acceptable? Are our loads safely secured, or should they be covered to stop bees escaping? Do we need fatalities as a result of this before we learn? What time of the day should we be shifting hives, and in what climatic conditions? And should we place hives on public land and roadways without permission? Honey harvesting with large dump sites. What about other transport operators and the school bus following a bee truck? How far away is enough? Existing relationships and long-term sites? Capability of the site to support adequate nutrition? 1 hive per hectare? Who knows the science behind that? Overloading, boundary pillaging, around housing, schools and roads. Is this sustainable beekeeping, or is it sensible? Original site, 50 hives, long-standing arrangements with an owner. Then there's a dump site, 250 metres across the road with 500 hives. Honey is removed. This is a real situation. Don't know where it is. Honey removed from 500 hives within 24 hours. Massive bee issue. Farmhouse and family in close proximity. Bee orientation lost. Hundreds of thousands of bees lost as the apiarist is forced to sweep the bridge clear. And this is the real site once again, but it is indication of what's going on out there. And I'll just leave the last slide here. Clicks. Code of ethics. Why does it matter? Why should I listen? How are you going to make me? Are we mature enough to establish some ground rules and honour them? And I think the last part is very apt. So from here on in, I'd like to invite questions and maybe particularly solutions. We'd like to hear from you. Come up to the mics and give your ideas in 2 minutes. The bell ringers. We'll keep you to the... So we get as many people providing solutions as we can, and we'll put it to the panel here and they can offer some ideas. So any thoughts, any ideas? We need as an industry to begin this conversation, and this is the opportunity to do so. Can we go to 1.5 million hives in the country? What's the consequences before that, or even at that point? So I invite some questions and preferably some solutions. There's one lady here.
I've got a comment on self-regulatory. In my experience, it doesn't provide an equal playing field because the people who are good doing it anyway without with intrinsic self-motivation and regulation, and the people who don't play by the rule, they won't do it. I mean, that's the same story with farmers and fencing off. So I believe, because someone alluded, they don't think regulatory was necessary. I believe there's a certain amount of regulatory positive, and then there should be some self-regulation. So is there any discussion of some kind of framework that, doesn't undermine the ethics?
Today is the discussion. I'll leave it open to the panel. Anyone in the panel like to answer that?
It's been a discussion for years, if I can remember, in the industry. It goes back a long, long way. And the term that was floated around was code of ethics, and it was sightings like a kilometre from the next B site that didn't have anything to do with what's defined in the APRIS Act, in the PMS. The APRIS Act, boy, that dates me. But in the PMS, but it certainly did provide some kind of a guideline. But I think under the current circumstances, it's no longer particularly realistic either.
Thanks, Alan. Anyone else like to comment on that? Okay, we've got another question over here, and then I'll take this one over here. So,
Stephen Browning, Green Party MP. I believe we do need to go down the regulatory path and fairly quick about it in a precautionary way. What I've been seeing in various parts of the country, and particularly some of that almost criminal behaviour, it would appear, in Northland, as an example, there's no way that we can expect a code of ethics and a industry best practice guide to do it. There will always be cowboys and those that will play around the edges. The issue is then, and you can think about it in terms of fisheries, if we went down the quota management system, who would get precedence in any particular area, and what would be the guide for the different forage opportunities in any area. I think we've got the technology and understanding around a lot of the forage stuff, and we can move that along quickly, but just move a little bit more slowly with the expansion so that we get it right. But it will have to be looking back. Is it people that have been in the area for 2 years, 5 years or 10 years that it would have precedence? But something must happen like that, in my view.
Thanks, Stefan.
Very interested for the rest of the conference. Thanks.
Can I just put it to the panel? Anyone want to answer that? Make comment? Okay. We'll move to our next question over here, or solution.
Fit Wairapa, landowner and beekeeper. I am rather despondent about the fact that we do have looming overhiving, but with a legal background, I have to say that regulation is next to impossible. And secondly, I say regulation without the free consent of the governed will never, never work. So what then are we to do if we cannot avoid the fact that as many of us being governed must agree? And I think the only sensible result as a start from today is to agree on one or two things that are so basic that no rational person would disagree. In terms of what is so basic that 95% of people will agree, I would start with 1, no new beekeeper should establish a new site within 200 metres of an existing site. Second, it is a real pain for those with pack houses to be invaded by bees in their course of operation. Should we then have a voluntary separation distance of 500 metres or 1,000 metres from a pack house? Thirdly, the way out of our problems is, in the case of Manuka,
Can you wrap up?
Manuka plantation.
Yes.
And that requires new investment. Do we agree a separation distance from somebody's Manuka plantation is that distance perhaps 500 metres? Lastly, pollen sources. Somebody is investing heavily in new pollen sources. What then is the separation distance? Is it again perhaps 500 metres? So for discussion, are those 4 proposals so elementary that we could agree them today?
Thanks very much, Dan. I'll just invite a quick comment from the panel on that. Any comments? Or should we move on to the next?
Just on your second point, if I had a mobile honey extraction / pack house, then no one's allowed within 200 metres of my mobile plant, which goes all over the North Island. I don't have one, but if we want to base that rule you've just said, look, don't get me wrong, I don't have 125,000 hives on every one of my sites. I only have 400 hives, 500 hives, but you know, a lot of this can be answered with actually we need to get back to the basics of decent beekeeping practices. Some of the stuff is so simple to fix. Daytime bees fly, don't move them. Nighttime they don't fly, then you can move them. If you can't get from A to B in one fuel tank, put another fuel tank on the truck or carry some bloody jerry cans with you. Stop putting bees on the side of the road that people get stung that walk past. Instead of having a one gate rule putting hives in the paddock, use the second gate at the other side of the paddock and get further away from where people are. It's simple bloody beekeeping practice, people.
Thanks very much.